In a quiet school where harsh rules were treated like justice, a shy girl's worst moment became everyone's wake-up call. Because right when it all went wrong, a world-famous fighter walked in by mistake, and nothing was ever the same again. There's a small town in Iowa where the schools look clean, the lawns stay trimmed, and the rules run deep. Parents like it here. They say the kids are well-behaved and the teachers mean business. But behind the fresh paint and perfect smiles, there's something colder, something that hides behind the word discipline. At the front of the town's middle school stood Principal Edwards, tall, clean-cut, always in a suit. The kind of man who smiled for pictures, but never once cracked a smile that reached his eyes. He didn't believe in second chances. He believed in making examples. That morning, his shoes echoed sharply down the hallway as students filed into their classroom seats. One by one, they dropped into chairs, half asleep, their matching blue uniforms blending into the walls. And then there was Maddie. She sat in the third row, second seat from the window, silent, still, and invisible. Maddie had long brown hair, the kind she always kept tied back with the same faded scrunchie. She didn't talk much. Most days, nobody really noticed she was there, unless they needed someone to laugh at. The jokes were quiet, but sharp. About her clothes, her shoes, her lunch that always smelled like leftovers. Some kids just exist on the edges. Maddie was one of them. But that day was different. That day, Principal Edwards didn't just walk into class with a clipboard. He walked in holding electric clippers. The room went dead quiet. Maddie looked up, confused. "Stand up," he said. Cold and clear. She hesitated, but the room was watching. No one said a word. No one asked why. She walked to the front, taking slow steps on the linoleum floor. Her eyes didn't meet his. She stood there, frozen, as he held up the clippers and clicked them on. The buzz filled the silence like a scream. The first chunk of her hair fell to the ground, then another, and suddenly it wasn't quiet anymore. The room burst into laughter. Phones came out, thumbs tapped record, some mouths dropped open. Others couldn't stop laughing. And Maddie? She didn't cry, she didn't move. She just stared at the wall in front of her. Behind her was a big sign, bright yellow, with bold blue letters, "Discipline builds character." No one noticed the irony. They saw a girl getting punished. They saw authority being enforced. They saw a lesson being taught. But what really happened was something else entirely. This wasn't discipline. This wasn't teaching. This was humiliation, dressed up in a tie and a mission statement. And Maddie? She was the target. Again. Stripped of more than just her hair. Stripped of dignity. Stripped of safety. Stripped of her place in that classroom. She stood there, surrounded by laughter and screens, as pieces of her identity dropped to the floor like broken feathers. And no one, not a single classmate, not a single teacher, stepped forward to stop it. Maybe they were scared. Maybe they thought it was deserved. Maybe they were just too used to this kind of thing to care. Whatever the reason, no one helped her, and in that moment, Maddie wasn't a student. She was a message, a warning to everyone else. Fall in line, or be next. But what no one realized, what no one even imagined, was that someone else had walked into the school that day. Someone with sharp eyes and clenched fists. Someone who had built her life on fighting back. Someone who didn't believe silence was strength. And while the principal thought this day would end like any other. Someone just walked into that building who didn't plan to stay silent. The wrong door, the right woman. That same afternoon, just a few blocks away, a different kind of presence pulled into town. The plan was simple. Ronda Rousey had been invited to speak at a youth gym about discipline, confidence, and never backing down. The kind of talk she gave all over the country, especially in places that needed it most. The gym had been buzzing for days about her visit. But with small-town planning, came small-town confusion. One misprinted address, one distracted receptionist, one quick point of a finger toward the wrong building. So instead of going to the gym, Rhonda was led to middle school. She didn't question it. She was used to tight schedules, tight doors, and tighter fists. Wherever kids were gathered, she was ready to speak. She walked confidently through the school's front hallway. Posters on the wall talked about respect and responsibility. Teachers passed her, their eyes wide but unsure what to say. A student aide quickly ushered her toward what they believed was the assembly room. The classroom door was already half open, and just as her hand touched the frame, the sound hit her. Zzz, the unmistakable hum of clippers, laughter, phones, a chill that wasn't from the weather. Rhonda pushed the door fully open. The scene didn't register all at once. It unfolded in sharp layers. In the center of the room sat a young girl, shoulders slouched, hands folded in her lap, hair half gone. Long locks of brown hair lay scattered on the floor like fallen leaves. Her face was frozen, not in anger, not in fear, just blank. Behind her stood a man in a suit, holding electric clippers like a trophy, his smile wide, his tie straight. Like this was just another day at work. Around them, kids sat in desks, laughing, recording, whispering to one another. Some looked uncomfortable, but no one was moving. No one was helping, and then the air shifted. Rhonda stepped inside. The sound of the clippers stopped. Some of the kids noticed her immediately. Their laughter died, phones slowly lowered, heads turned. The man, Principal Edwards, glanced up and saw her. For a second, his smile stayed. Then it faded, just a little, unsure. But Rhonda didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her face said enough. Her posture, solid and strong, filled the doorway like a wall. Her fists, slightly clenched at her sides, weren't raised, but they didn't need to be. It was the kind of silence that carried more weight than shouting ever could. She looked at the girl, Maddie, then looked at the clippers, then at the students, then back at the principal. The temperature in the room dropped. No one laughed now. Some kids shifted in their chairs. Some looked down. A few looked like they wanted to disappear into their seats. And for a long, heavy moment, nothing happened. No movement, no apology, no excuse. Just the stare of a woman who had fought in cages, stood in stadiums, and now stood in a school that had clearly lost its way. It wasn't just a wrong turn anymore. It was a moment that demanded to be remembered. This wasn't the talk she was scheduled to give, but it was the one this school was about to get. And what Rhonda did next didn't just change Maddie's life. It ripped the mask off a broken system and made the whole world look twice. Flashbacks and forgotten names. As the tension in the classroom hung thick in the air, Maddie's eyes stayed low, her hands still resting on her lap. The weight of her humiliation hadn't fully settled, but her mind, it had already drifted. Not to the buzzing clippers, not to the laughter, but back, years ago, to the first time she ever walked through these same school doors. Back then, she wasn't a student. She was just a little girl tagging along behind her mother who worked as a janitor at the same school. Her mom's name was Angela Walker, a woman with rough hands, tired eyes, and a soft voice that never spoke louder than it had to. She wasn't well known. But to those who remembered her, she was the one who always stayed late, who swept the gym after basketball games, who brought donuts on Fridays even though she couldn't afford them. Angela had dreams of becoming a teacher, but life had other plans. After Maddie's dad walked out, it was just the two of them. She took what job she could get, and in this town, that job was mopping floors in the same building where the well-paid. Staff barely noticed her. But Angela had a problem. She spoke up when others stayed quiet. She noticed when certain students were treated unfairly. She noticed when a gym coach crossed a line with a student. She noticed when a teacher humiliated a boy with autism in front of the whole class. And when she brought it up to the administration, she wasn't praised. She was punished. First came the warnings. Then her hours were cut. Then came rumors about her being unstable. A few weeks later, she was fired. Just like that. No fight, no fuss, just silence. Maddie was only 5 then, too young to understand how things worked. But she remembered the night her mom came home, eyes red, holding a brown box of her things. She remembered how the house felt heavier after that. She remembered the night her mom tore off her name tag and cried on the bathroom floor, and now, years later, Maddie sat in the same school. At the same age her mother once cleaned its halls. It wasn't just a building, it was a graveyard of what her mom used to hope for. Maddie had grown up poor. Her clothes came from thrift stores. Her backpack was a hand-me-down. Her lunchbox was duct-taped at the edges. Kids called her weird, said she smelled funny, said she didn't belong. She kept her head down and didn't argue, because part of her believed it too. She didn't talk about her mom much. People forgot her name quickly. Teachers mixed her up with other girls. To most, Maddie was invisible, a ghost girl, drifting from class to class, never raising her hand, never making noise, but tucked inside her pocket every single day was something no one knew about. A small silver locket, scratched and worn, hanging from a thin chain. Inside it, 2 photos. One was of her mother, back when she was younger, smiling, in front of the school playground in a janitor's uniform. The other was of a chubby baby in her arms. Maddie. She carried that locket like a shield, even when she didn't fully understand why. And now, here, on the worst day of her life, it slipped out. Fallen near her feet, forgotten in the panic. Almost, lost in the chaos, until Rhonda saw it. The small glint of metal caught Rhonda's eye as she stood in silence, still watching the room breathe in shame. She bent down slowly without saying anything and picked it up. She didn't open it right away. She didn't have to. She just looked at Maddie, really looked at her, and saw something the others hadn't. It wasn't just about what happened today. It was about everything that came before it. This wasn't a random act of bullying. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a system that had been pushing down the same family, generation after generation, until one of them couldn't stand anymore. And now here stood Rhonda, holding proof in her hand that the past was never really gone. That locket was more than jewelry. It was a clue. A connection. A thread tying Maddie back to a story the school tried to bury. The staff might not have recognized Maddie's face, but they knew Angela Walker. They remembered the janitor who wouldn't shut up. They remembered the problem woman who dared to speak out. And they never expected her daughter to walk back through the front door. But she did. Quiet, small, unassuming. Until now. Sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it returns, stronger, louder, and wearing gloves that don't back down from a fight. What happens when a fighter steps in? Rhonda stood at the front of the room, the silver locket still in her hand, her eyes locked on Maddie, then slowly on everyone else. The tension in the room had settled into a thick, uncomfortable silence. You could hear the hum of the overhead lights, the soft shuffling of sneakers under desks, and the barely there breathing of kids who suddenly didn't want to be seen. Rhonda didn't yell. She didn't slam her fist on the table or shout like people expected her to. She just spoke, clear, calm, and low. She looked at the class full of kids, many still holding their phones, and asked one quiet question. "Is this who you are?" Nobody answered. She repeated it, not louder but deeper. "Is this who you are?" Some kids looked down. Others blinked fast, as if they'd just woken up. And then she spoke, not like a fighter, not like a celebrity, but like a grown woman who'd seen the worst sides of people and refused to accept silence as safety. She didn't say names. She didn't point fingers. She didn't need to. She talked about how easy it is to laugh when everyone else is laughing, how cruelty often hides behind just joking and just following rules, how people in power, like the man standing behind her used discipline as a disguise for control, and how every kid in this room now had a choice to make: stay silent or stand for something better. Nobody laughed now. The giggles were long gone. The smirks had faded. One girl in the back wiped a tear. A boy on the left slowly locked his phone screen and lowered it to his desk. Rhonda turned around and looked directly at Principal Edwards. He stood frozen, his smile from earlier now replaced by confusion and rising panic. His hands hung uselessly. By his sides, the clippers no longer in them. He tried to speak. "Ms. Rousey, I think there's been a misunderstanding," but Rhonda didn't flinch. She just looked at him the same way she used to look at her opponents before a fight started. Calm, focused, unshaken. "You call this discipline?" she said, voice like iron. "Or just control dressed up in a tie?" He stammered again. Words came out, but none of them made sense. It was like watching a mask slip off in slow motion. And then the second twist happened. Because what Principal Edwards didn't know, what most of the kids had forgotten, is that almost everyone in the room had been filming earlier. But now those clips showed more than just a girl being humiliated. They showed Ronda Rousey walking in. They showed her picking up a locket. They captured every word she said, clear as crystal, filmed from multiple angles. And within minutes of the bell ringing, clips started showing up on TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube, and Twitter. The caption said it all. He shaved her head for discipline. But then Ronda Rousey walked in. The views climbed fast, then faster. First a few hundred, then 10,000. By nightfall, millions. The world couldn't look away. News headlines popped up. Wrestling champion walks in on shocking school punishment, student humiliated, until Ronda Rousey intervened. Iowa school faces backlash. After viral shaving incident, the school tried to go into damage control. The district released a bland statement calling it a misunderstanding. They said they were reviewing the situation and committed to student well-being. But it was too late. The video was everywhere. The screenshots were being shared. The commentary had begun. And more importantly, people were angry. Parents started calling the school nonstop. Alumni demanded accountability. Activists organized outside the building by morning. Talk shows covered it. Influencers reposted it. And Rhonda? She didn't go on a media tour. She didn't capitalize on the moment. She stayed quiet because the clip spoke for itself. What she did in that room wasn't flashy. It wasn't violent, but it was powerful. And it turned a small-town secret into a nationwide discussion. In the days that followed, Maddie didn't say much either. She stayed home, her hair uneven, and her heart still processing what had happened. But for the first time, she wasn't invisible anymore. People knew her name. They knew what was done to her, and they saw her not as a victim, but as the girl who stood in silence, until someone else refused to. When the world starts watching, the things once done in silence begin to crack wide open, and for this school, the cracks were just beginning to show. The next day, the school felt quieter than usual. The usual buzz in the halls had been replaced by whispers and sideways glances. Students walked a little slower. Teachers seemed unsure of what to say. No one was used to their school being the center of national attention, and no one wanted to be the next person filmed. But Rhonda had one more reason to stay. She wasn't done watching, and more importantly, she wasn't done listening. As she walked the hallway outside the main office, something on the wall caught her attention. A frame, dusty, faded with time. It hung slightly crooked, almost forgotten between two newer, shinier awards. Rhonda stopped. It was an old staff photo, taken in the spring of 1998. A group of teachers and employees lined up in front of the school. Steps, smiling wide for the camera. Most of their faces were unfamiliar. But one stood out, third from the left. Angela Walker, younger, standing tall, smiling without sadness. Not in a janitor's uniform, but in a clean white blouse, holding a clipboard. Like she belonged there, like she was proud of her place in that school. The plaque below the photo read, 1998, Staff Excellence Team for Outstanding Dedication. Rhonda leaned in, wiping away some of the dust with her sleeve. She didn't call anyone over. She didn't make a scene, but she took a photo of it with her phone. Later that afternoon, she sat with Maddie on a bench outside the front office. The news vans were still parked across the street. Teachers kept sneaking glances through windows. But inside that little space between the building and the sidewalk, it was just the two of them. Rhonda showed Maddie the picture. Maddie blinked. "That's your mom, isn't it?" Maddie stared at it like she was looking through time. She slowly nodded. "She never told me she was part of that. And why would she?" All Maddie had ever heard were the stories of her mother being ignored, being punished, being erased. But this picture told a different story, a quieter one, a buried truth. Angela Walker had once been valued here, celebrated, publicly appreciated. But somehow, over the years, her name had disappeared from the school's memory, like she'd never mattered at all. The silence Maddie had grown up with wasn't just about poverty or bad luck. It was systemic, intentional, convenient. And now, here, it was, caught in a photo that had been hanging on the wall the entire time. That's when Rhonda reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out Maddie's locket. She gently opened it and held it beside the image of Angela in the photo. Same face, same smile. Even the same gold hoop earrings. It was a perfect match. Two different generations. Two versions of the same woman. Both were forgotten, and both were pushed aside until now. And in that moment, something clicked for Maddie. She wasn't just a bullied kid. She wasn't just some quiet girl with old shoes. She was part of a story that started long before her. And now, because of one photo and one fighter who refused to walk away, that story was no longer invisible. The hallway hadn't just held memories. It held the truth in plain sight. Locket, a photograph, a mother's legacy, and a daughter who finally understood where she came from. The cracks in the system weren't just personal. They were old, deep, and carefully hidden. But now, they were impossible to ignore. From viral video to national outcry. By the time the weekend arrived, the video had circled the globe. It wasn't just a trending clip anymore. It was a headline, a talking point, a viral storm with no signs of slowing. Down, girl shaved in class, until Ronda Rousey walked in. That was the line plastered across news tickers, blog posts, and evening broadcasts. The story had everything: shocking footage, public outrage, and a celebrity stepping into the middle of it all. But behind all the noise was still Maddie, the quiet girl whose life had been torn open in front of the world. People weren't just watching. They were reacting. Parents from all over the country called the school, leaving voicemails full of disbelief and fury. Emails flooded the inboxes of school board members. Some wrote letters, others took to social media. One local mom even stood outside the school gate with a sign that read, "We don't shave character into children. We support it." And still, through it all, Maddie stayed silent. She didn't speak to reporters. She didn't answer the questions shouted at her when she walked. From the school parking lot to the front office, she kept her head down, just like she always had. But that didn't mean she had nothing to say. Instead of going on TV, Maddie sat at her kitchen table one evening and wrote a letter, pen on paper. No help, no filters, just truth. It was only a few paragraphs long, but every word carried weight. She wrote about how it felt to be invisible, how the worst pain wasn't the clippers buzzing, it was knowing no one thought it was wrong. She wrote about the silence in the room and how one woman's eyes, not her fame, not her fists, just her eyes, made her feel human again. She didn't name names. She didn't ask for revenge. She asked for one thing: let kids be kids. Let kindness be louder than fear. Rhonda read the letter and posted it to her social media, writing, "Only, this is the strongest voice I've heard in a long time." The post went viral. Again. And this time, people didn't just watch. They responded. Within hours, donations started pouring in, some small, some large, all carrying the same message. For Maddie, for her mom, for the truth. One woman sent a check with a note that read, "Your mother wasn't wrong. She was early. The support was overwhelming." But the most unexpected moment came a few days later, when a formal email arrived at the Walker home from the school board. It was an apology, not just to Maddie, but to Angela. The same woman they had fired all those years ago for speaking out was now being publicly recognized. The letter called her a voice of conscience ahead of her time and a name we should never have forgotten. Angela read it twice, then a third time. She didn't cry. She just closed her eyes, breathed deeply, and whispered, "Finally." As for Principal Edwards, he was suspended by the end of the week, pending an official investigation. The school district tried to spin it as protocol and due diligence, but no one was buying it. Not after millions had seen what happened. Not after thousands of emails and voicemails flooded their system. Not after the world decided to pay attention. Teachers started speaking up too. One said she'd seen Edwards berate students for years. Another said she'd been told not to question his discipline methods. A former staff member even admitted they were told to stay in line or stay quiet. And for the first time, the building that had once silenced so many was starting to echo with truth. But through all the headlines and media pressure, Maddie remained grounded. She didn't want fame. She didn't want pity. She just wanted what her mom had once wanted, for people to do what's right, even when no one's watching. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. It took a world-famous fighter to walk in at the exact wrong moment for the world to finally open its eyes. But not every scar fades quietly. Some demand to be felt. Some demand to be heard. And the next chapter of Maddie's life was about to speak louder than anything yet. The hallway, where it happened, had been a few weeks since everything changed. The headlines had quieted. The news vans had moved on. Social media had found new stories to chase. But inside the school walls, something had shifted. And Maddie felt it the moment she stepped back inside. She wore her hair loose now. It was uneven, still growing out, in patches, but she didn't try to hide it. There was something almost defiant in the way she let it fall naturally. No hats, no hoods, just her. Returning to the place where everything had broken, and somehow, where something new had begun. Students passed her in the hallway, but this time there were no whispers, no laughter. Some nodded slightly. A few even offered small, respectful smiles. No one tried to talk too much. No one pointed a phone. And that silence, this time, it wasn't cruel. It was careful. It was earned. Teachers noticed her too. Their eyes lingered longer than before, but without judgment. More like quiet recognition. They looked at her not as someone who needed correcting, but someone they should have listened to a long time ago. Maddie didn't say much. She didn't have to. She walked slowly through the hallways, taking in the same tiled floors, the same bulletin boards, the same lockers with stickers and scuffs from years past. But when she reached the classroom where it had all happened, she stopped. The door was open. The chairs were different now, newer. The posters had been changed, and the air inside felt lighter. She stepped just inside the doorway and looked toward the exact spot where she'd once sat, third row, second seat from the window, but the chair was gone, not replaced. Gone. In its place was a small wooden platform with a glass case on top. And inside that case, resting gently on a velvet cloth, was her silver locket. Just beside it, mounted on the wall, was a plaque. It read, "Courage in Silence." for those who stood still when the world shouted wrong. Below that was a simple engraving. Maddie, Walker. A voice the world finally heard. She stood still for a moment, taking it all in. Her breath caught, but not from sadness, from something else, something heavier and quieter. Healing. Behind her, footsteps approached. Maddie turned to see her mother, Angela, standing just a few feet away. No mop in hand this time, no uniform, just jeans, a clean blouse, and a small pin on her collar that read, Staff Advocate. The school board had offered her a new role, one that gave her a voice, one that let her protect the students she used to clean up after. Angela didn't say anything at first. She just walked up beside her daughter and gently reached for her hand. Their fingers locked together. No cameras, no speeches, just presence. For the first time, Maddie felt like her story was part of the building, not buried under it. She had been laughed at, humiliated, and forgotten. But now her story was etched in the walls, not to be pitied, not to be remembered with shame, but to be honored. She had survived what others stayed quiet about. She had stood still when it would have been easier to run. And somehow, without ever raising her voice, she had made the whole world listen. Angela squeezed her hand once. Maddie nodded without looking up, and they stood there, just the two of them, beside a chair that no longer held pain but meaning. But even as the hallway honored the past, one last twist was still waiting, hidden behind a door that no one had opened in years. Justice with gloves off as days turned into weeks. What started as a single viral moment grew into something much bigger, an investigation that the school district could no longer avoid. What happened to Maddie had pulled back the curtain. And what it revealed wasn't just one bad decision. It was years of silence, buried complaints, and power used the wrong way. The school board launched a full review, and what they found shocked even the people who thought they knew how the system worked. Emails, old reports, student grievances that were never followed up, teacher concerns that were ignored or deleted. In one file, a counselor had warned about Principal Edwards' extreme discipline style 3 years earlier. No action had been taken. One by one, former students came forward. Some spoke publicly. Others wrote anonymous letters. But the stories kept piling up. Stories of punishments that went too far. Stories of being silenced. Stories that sounded too familiar, too close to Maddie's. Even teachers, ones who had once stood by quietly, started speaking out. A retired math teacher admitted she had watched Edwards humiliate students and always felt off about it, but feared for her job. Another said he was told, flat out, to let the principal handle discipline, no matter what it looked like. The district had no choice. They called for an official hearing, one that would be open to the public. The gymnasium was turned into a courtroom of sorts. Folding chairs lined the floors. A long table stood up front with microphones and a row of school board members sitting in pressed suits. Cameras were allowed. So were reporters. The town showed up in full. Parents, teachers, students, even strangers from nearby towns who had followed the story online. They packed the bleachers, holding signs and sitting shoulder to shoulder, waiting to see what would happen. Maddie sat quietly near the front, her mother at her side holding her hand again, just like before. And then, Ronda Rousey walked in. She wasn't dressed like a fighter. No gloves, no stage lights, just jeans, a fitted blazer, and that same calm presence she carried the day she changed everything. She was asked to speak, and she did. Not with anger, not with blame, but with truth. She talked about what she saw, what she heard, and most importantly, what she felt in that moment when she stepped through that classroom door. She told the board, "You don't need to understand what discipline looks like from a book. You need to understand what humiliation feels like when no one stands up for you." The room was silent. No one argued. No one interrupted. When it came time for the verdict, everyone leaned forward. The board spoke slowly and clearly. Principal Edwards was to be immediately terminated, stripped of his tenure, pension benefits, and position in the district. His name would be removed from plaques, programs, and archive directories. It wasn't just a firing. It was a full erasure of the power he once misused. Maddie sat frozen for a moment, as if unsure what she had just heard. Then she turned to her mother. Angela gave a soft smile, her eyes filled with something heavy and beautiful, relief. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Maddie smiled too. Not just a polite smile, not a half smile, a real one. The kind that starts in your chest and finds its way to your face without you forcing it. The kind that says, I made it through. The gym was filled with quiet applause. Some people cried, others stood. But no one looked away, because justice had finally shown up. And it hadn't come with noise or violence. It had come with proof, presence, and persistence. It had come from a girl who never asked to be the center of attention, a woman who walked into the wrong room at the right time, and a town finally ready to face the truth it had ignored for too long. They tried to break her spirit in public, but justice stood beside her, with gloves laced and truth ready to fight.